lights burn bright. You're blinded now, can't see the fight. Smoke and mirrors, they lead the way. Fooling hearts night after day. Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row. Painted faces.
At some point in American history, right and wrong stopped becoming something that we all agree on or agreed on. And this didn't happen overnight, not with a single vote, but gradually and quietly. And one moment, more than any other, became a symbol for that shift. And this is the moment that people say they took the Bible out of schools. Or did they? Or did they remove something deeper, a shared moral compass that held a diverse nation together, right? Because if America is supposed to be so diverse, and where everyone is so different, what is our symbol? What is the one commonality that unites us as a nation, right? And I think that every culture, every nation, every generation, every person that has a walk of life, for others to join, there has to be a symbol where everyone can come together, right? So what is that moral compass that held the nation together? And so this is breaking the system. And tonight we're going to ask a hard question. Was America divided by design or by the loss of what once unified it? So there was no single day when the Bible was actually banned per se from schools. That's a myth. What did happen was there were 2 Supreme Court decisions in the early 1960s, and there was actually a lot that went on in the 1960s. But these decisions that fundamentally changed how morality, religion, and govern interacted was in the 1960s. So first off, we look at Engel versus Vital. And the court ruled that public schools could not lead students in an official government written prayer. And the reasoning was that government cannot impose or mandate religious practices, right? That's that separation of church and state, okay? Then a year later in 1963, we have the Abington School District versus Shemp. And this ruling ended mandatory Bible readings and the Lord's Prayer in public schools. And before this, many states required, right, this is coming from individual states, required daily Bible readings and a recitation of Christian prayers, but the courts ruled these practices being unconstitutional, not because the Bible was illegal, but because coercion was, right? You can't coerce people into being or believing in one religion based over another, right? That's that whole idea of individualization between church and state. So the Bible wasn't removed from buildings, it was removed from authority, because students could still bring Bibles, right? You could still carry Bibles on you and with you. You could still read them privately, and you could still study them academically. But the state itself could no longer say, this is the truth and that you will follow, right? And we can all agree that, like, I don't necessarily think that that was ever a good thing. Okay, that's that whole idea of separation of church and state, right? And we have to be very careful when we have something that unifies us, that it's not something that is taking a freedom away from us in the process. Okay? So a great example would be if we deemed that guns are dangerous, and if we all agree on that as a nation, right? But then that limits us on how we can defend ourselves. Okay? So we have to be very careful on that. But if we look at the Bible, maybe just maybe, it was a moral compass in being a northern star, something that guides us in the dark of night. Okay? So for generations, the Bible wasn't just a religious text. It was other things. It was a shared language. It was a moral framework. It was a cultural referencing point, even for people who weren't devout. Think about the 10 Commandments, right? They weren't debated. They were assumed. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Okay? Supporters of Bible-based education argue this did something crucial. It externalized morality. Right and wrong didn't come from feelings or trends, or especially from politics. And we have to be very careful about that last one. We should not be getting told what is right and what is wrong from politics and politicians, right? Getting government involved is never the answer. It should always come from we the people. And so that idea of right and wrong came from something higher than just an individual or just an idea, okay? When that reference point was removed from daily education, critics argue that the message was clear. Morality is now personal. It's relative. It's negotiable. Okay? And so let's look at the data after 1963. Because correlation is not causation, but patterns still matter, right? And like we've talked about before, history has a way of repeating itself. Not entirely, but in little nuances all throughout history. So the decades that followed 1963 show what many call the Great Break, especially within the United States. Okay? So we're going to look at three different things. Violent crime. So from 1960 to 1980, violent crime nearly tripled, peaking in the early 1990s. And we can all agree on that, right? Next, we're going to look at family structure. Divorce rates doubled between the 1960s and the 1980s. And out-of-wedlock births rose by around 5% in 1960 to over 40% decades later. Okay, that's huge. Now there's no family dynamics in anything. And the last thing we look at is social trust. Confidence in institutions declined steadily after the 1960s. And I would still say that that's happening more and more today. Would you not agree? Trust in things like the government and media and churches, it fractured in the 1960s. And so those who believed in the moral compass theory argue that when children stopped being taught absolute moral restraint, society began teaching personal justification instead. And I think we can really see that just in the last few years, when, and we're not pointing fingers here, but when certain people are like, you have to respect my feelings and my boundaries and my desires, but I'm not going to respect or appreciate or understand yours, right? It's only one-sided, okay? And there's a really good episode of Landman where they go into the left and right, and it's season 2. I think it's like episode 5 or 6, but they have this moral argument between a girl on the left and a girl on the right. And not to spoil anything for the viewers out there that watch this show, because it's a really good show. But watch it past. Watch what happens past that episode. In that, initially they have no common ground. There's nothing that brings the left and the right together. But eventually they take a step back, and they both look at each other from the other's point of view. And eventually walls start to come down, and they start to agree on a few things, and they start to help each other out. Okay? And I think we're at that point where both on the left and on the right, we have put up such a barrier, we put up such a wall, that we're not willing to meet each other on middle ground. Okay? But going back to the violent crime, the family structure, and this social trust or social distrust now more than ever before, I want you to think about this. For those of us that are decently old, what did we do when we were kids? Well, we went outside and we played with other kids. And this is where I think kids hold the keys. And I've argued this a lot, especially since COVID, that the keys to the future are within the children of today. And every generation, those keys get passed down to the next generation of children. But let's go back to this example. So when you were children, you went outside and you played with other children. Okay? And then you got to become friends through common interests, maybe riding a bike, riding your skateboard, playing D&D, whatever it was. Okay? You then invited that child, that friend, over to your house, and you had sleepovers. And their parents would come pick them up, and your parents would come pick you up, and their parents and your parents would become friends. And we created this social network that all started where? It all started with the children. Okay? Now let's fast forward to today. Think of all of the children, all of the kids today that are extremely introverts, that they don't have real friends, that they don't go out into society, and they don't mingle, they don't ride their skateboard, and they don't ride their bicycle, and they don't do extracurricular sports, and they don't get involved with other children. They play games with other kids online, and there's that internet wall. There's no human interaction, and because there's no human interaction, the parents don't become friends, and we don't create this network that needs to be made, especially in a nation that's so culturally diverse as what the United States is. And I think that is extremely important. Extremely important. Because when we isolate ourselves, right, we tend more to become something that we're not supposed to be. Humans are very humans like to interact with other humans, and when we become confined to individual spaces in an artificial environment, we change and we become something completely and entirely different, right? Society feels a little different today, doesn't it, than when we were kids? And I don't think it's just the internet. I think there's a lot of other factors that come into play, but the main part is that kids don't play with other kids, and parents don't become friends with other parents. So here's another example. How many of you, whether if you live in the country or you live in town, how many of you know that your parents are friends with your neighbors? That you have a neighbor that you can call on any time of the day. You know their names. You've been over to their house. You know their kids' names. Like your kids hang out with their kids. That used to happen a lot. It doesn't happen much anymore, right? There's a lot of people that have grown up to become introverts, and because of that, Now we've got neighborhoods that aren't very friendly, and so that leads to crime rates going up. I 100% believe in that. And because of divorce rates and because of out-of-wedlock births and because of the absent-minded father, especially in the African-American families, right? Look at the data. The statistics are there. It all backs it up. When you break the nuclear family, which was what the foundation of America was built on, right? Families starting new, where they could pick up where they were growing up. They could pick up and they could move to a new place and lay down roots and make something entirely different with new people that they, right, with all these new people that were wanting to do the same thing. And once again, there's no commonality. There's no commonality in these neighborhoods, and people just kind of like do their own thing. When was the last time that you went and knocked on your neighbor's door and you just had a conversation with him? Or you had a neighbor that bought a house nearby and you baked some cookies and you took him some cookies and you had a conversation with him, right? For some of us, it's probably never. Recently had a new couple that moved in next door. And this is like the third or fourth couple that's moved in next door. It's a tiny little house that we have next door. And when we moved in, when we bought our house, within the first week, this lovely little couple, they were about our age, they brought over some, I don't remember what it was. It was a plate of cookies or a pie or something, a cake. And so that was kind of like the peace offering. And we had conversations. And for the short time that they lived in that house, our kids and their kids were friends, and they hung out, and they kind of done stuff together. And we hung out, we talked. So when this new couple moved in, I wanted to make sure that we started off on the right foot. So we went over and just had a conversation. They were building a fire pit out back, and I had some extra wood. I'm like, anytime that you guys are out here and you need firewood, go ahead and help yourselves. It's the neighborly thing to do, right? And that's the commonality. That's the thing that brought us. That was the breadcrumb that brought us into having not necessarily a friendship, but a commonality where we can meet at the table and we can, we all start on like this friendly route within the neighborhood. So jumping back to biblical literacy and cultural loss, another measurable shift followed because of this. Americans stopped knowing the Bible, even culturally. And surveys now show that many Americans, they can't even name 4 Gospels. Fewer than half can list most of the 10 Commandments. And this matters beyond religion. The Bible is the most referenced book in Western history, right? It was used in a multitude of different things. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches references the Bible. Lincoln's rhetoric messaged the Bible. Shakespeare was messaged in the Bible. And American founding documents, right? The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. There are bits and pieces of breadcrumbs of the Bible used in those. So critics argue that this wasn't just secularization, it was a cultural amputation, right? Once again, there's no commonality, right? And I'm not saying that we all have to read the Bible. I'm not saying that we all have to believe in God, because you're all entitled to do as you please, right? That's the whole purpose of the idea. It's the whole idea of the United States. But what is the common thread that holds us together now? And if there is no common thread that holds us together, eventually we will get pulled apart, because there are so many things that's built within this system, and the system itself is designed to destroy ideas like the United States, right? The principal foundation of the United States, the system that humanity has built in the background because of greed and money and power and domination, right? The idea of the United States and what it was originally meant for was supposed to fight that. And the system itself was also designed to destroy ideas like the United States. So it really was a cultural amputation. So if we look at other empires and their moral collapse, history shows a reoccurring pattern. Empires rarely fall from invasion first. Rarely. And when we're talking about massive empires, they fall from internal decay. We look at Rome. Rome is a great example. They lost civic virtue. They embraced the idea of having excess food that they didn't need, excess water that they didn't need, excess power and money that they didn't need, right? And they replaced duty with entertainment. We know this. This is fact, especially during the final years before, and not all of Rome collapsed. Don't get that idea, because that's what we're taught in school, is that all of Rome collapsed, and that wasn't the case. It was just a majority of it. There was still a secular division of Rome that existed way beyond the Roman Empire. But towards the end of the massive Roman Empire, what was the saying? Give them entertainment and give them breadcrumbs, right? And they'll fall in line. The masses. Give them entertainment, right? Entertain them, feed them so their bellies are not full, and the majority of the population will fall in line. And this is exactly what they tried to do through the idea of like the Colosseums and the amphitheaters. Okay. Then we jump to the British Empire, and their moral confidence eroded after World War I, and the mission collapsed before the power did. Right? The British Empire reached, their hands were in everything, and we can still see bits and pieces of the British Empire falling today. It's all around us. You know, the United States is a great example of that. We pulled away from that. And so now we look at the United States. We've shifted from a Judeo-Christian absolutes to a secular pluralism and moral relativism. And so the question becomes unavoidable. Can a nation survive without a shared definition of all of its people of what is right and what is wrong? Our moral compass. And so let's think about our moral compass here in a couple things that's happened in the last few years. Let's take a look at Illinois, right? Where if you are arrested under the Safety Act, safe with a T, the Safety Act, and this is their argument, this is their wording, as long as you are not a violent criminal, you're basically arrested, you're processed, you're booked, and then what? You're let go back into society to do whatever you want to do again. And as long as you show up to your court date, the police won't come looking for you, right? But do the police have time? Do they have time to look for all the criminals that don't show up to their court dates, right? And is it morally right for us to find someone that's, let's say they're a pervert, or that they've killed somebody, or they've raped somebody, or they've stolen from somebody, they've wrecked somebody's life, to just arrest them, book them, and they'd be like, oh, you're free to go. Here's a card, here's your court date, show up, right? Do you not think, do you use your mind? Do you not think that they're going to go right back out into society and do the exact same thing that they've done again? Because statistics show that those people, now there are a few that will learn from their ways, but the majority of those people are repeat offenders. Right? Look at the people that they've been arresting lately, where they've been tried and convicted. They've been arrested 10 times, 15 times, 22 times, 45 times. Stupidity just has to be oozing from these people's minds to come up with these ideas to let these repeat offenders go. Right? So when is enough enough? When do we get a moral code in deciding again what is right and what is wrong? And so supporters of the 1963 ruling argue the complete opposite. They say the Bible wasn't removed, but coercion was. That morality didn't disappear, it evolved, and inclusion required neutrality. And in a nation of many faiths, government-led religion risks oppression. It does. Okay? So from this view, the chaos wasn't caused by secularization, but by economic upheaval, and by war and technology, and by a cultural change. And because more than anything, because of technology, culture has changed. Right? We just talked about this. Children aren't playing with other children. The nuclear family is dissolving. Parents aren't having as many kids as we once were, right? All of the things that made us who we are at a fundamental basis within our culture, within society, it's not there anymore. So the argument is that the Bible wasn't the anchor for this, but it was the gatekeeper. Okay? So what's the real question when America can't escape? So here's the real divide. Is America fractured because we removed the idea of God, because we removed the idea of the Bible, or because we removed the word agreement? Right? And once again, it's not that we don't all have to agree on everything, but if I'm so far right and you are so far left, and we can't agree on anything, we will never come to the middle. And if we can never come to the middle, come to the table to talk about the differences of opinions and ideas, and to articulate those differences with each other, then I'm sorry, America's dead. The idea of America is dead. Okay? So when everyone followed the same book, they didn't agree on everything, but they agreed on the rules. And when the book disappeared from authority, 330 or 350 million people, whatever we have in the United States now, those 330 million people began writing their own book. And so now we have 350 million different books, all being wrote simultaneously into what each person thinks that the United States should be or should look like. Some call that freedom. Others call it drift. Are we drifting apart? Are we drifting apart so much and so fast on so many ideas that the idea of what the United States once stood for, is that idea dead? And we should really look within ourselves. Not only within ourselves, but within our families, within our neighborhoods, within our towns, within our states. Because really this idea begins with all of us. And if we truly think that freedom can be achieved through 330 million different books all being wrote at the same time, then I think we're all delusional. We have to be able to come to an agreement. Our children have to be able to play together. We have to be able to talk with our neighbors. We have to be able to realize that we're not all going to agree on everything. But at some point, we've got to put our guard down. We've got to shake hands. And we've got to come to a neutral point, because if we don't, America's dead. And the idea, the principle, the foundation of that freedom that the United States of America is supposed to represent, that will be dead as well. Right? And so, this is breaking the system. We don't tell you what to believe. We ask what holds a nation together. And when belief itself is optional, what's next? And with that, we'll see you guys next time.